Melissa Carter tore Ava Mitchell's boarding pass in half as if she were ripping worthless trash. The torn pieces drifted to the floor, spinning slowly through the warm amber glow of the first-class cabin, beautiful in a cruel way. "People like you," Melissa murmured, her voice, quiet but sharp enough to cut the air, "don't sit here." The entire cabin froze. Every click, every soft farewell before takeoff vanished. Only the distant, steady hum of the engines remained. Ava didn't move. She didn't bend down to pick up the fragments. She didn't react. She simply lifted her head, her dark eyes still as a lake before a storm. An imaginary camera would sweep from Melissa's flushed, power-drunk face to Ava's calm one, unreadable, impossible to tell what storm lived beneath that stillness. Silence stretched tight and suffocating. A seed of injustice had been planted, and this expensive cabin was about to become the scene of its bloom. Ava Mitchell, 38 years old, had boarded the plane with the composure of someone who belonged anywhere she chose to stand. No showiness, no theatrics. A navy blazer, a minimalist bag, a stride so balanced every movement felt intentional. But to Melissa Carter, 42, a woman who saw herself as the gatekeeper, dividing the deserving from the misplaced Ava, was an anomaly. A black woman, dressed with quiet refinement rather than ostentation, sitting in a seat Melissa considered her personal territory. Wrong. Out of place. Something to be corrected. Melissa looked at Ava the way someone might look at an incorrect file in a system, something to fix, not a human being to respect. This was first class. Italian leather seats in champagne tones, amber lighting soft as silk, Krug champagne already poured for the white passengers in seats 1C and 2D. Amber Shaw, 51, the most notorious gossip on this route, dipped her chin to glance over eyes gleaming with the thrill of free drama. Ethan Cole, a 45-year-old businessman, paused mid-keystroke, narrowing his eyes. And Ava, seated in 2A, kept her posture, straight gaze, sweeping the cabin briefly before resting on the window. A kind of calm that the perceptive would recognize not weakness, but confidence with roots. Melissa was not perceptive. From the moment Ava placed her bag down, Melissa had felt bothered. Not loudly, but sharply, like the cold tip of a blade at the throat. No welcome aboard, no smile, no eye contact, only a cold measuring glance, an assessment unhidden. "Your bag is a little big," Melissa said when the cabin wasn't even full. "It's placed neatly under the seat," Ava replied, her tone light as breath. Melissa didn't respond. She pressed her lips and walked away. No one noticed Chloe Reed, the young junior attendant, watching Melissa with unease. Chloe knew Melissa's temper, but today something was off. Melissa returned again, this time standing like someone preparing to deal with a disruptive passenger. "Stand up," she ordered. Ava lifted her gaze. Her expression never changed. "Why, you're in the wrong class. Wrong seat, wrong place, wrong everything." Melissa's voice was sharp, each word hitting the floor like metal. Behind them, whispers rose. "Probably trying to get a free upgrade. Doesn't look like someone who buys first class." Yeah, she must have made a mistake. Amber let out a snide laugh, deliberately loud. I knew it. None of them knew they were witnessing the beginning of a monumental mistake. Ava met Melissa's gaze. "Would you like to check the passenger list? No need." Melissa snapped. "I know who belongs here." One quiet sentence, enough to expose everything. Prejudice, arrogance, blind faith in her own bias. Chloe shifted, wanting to speak. Ethan leaned forward, irritation growing. But Melissa stepped closer, snatching Ava's boarding pass the way one might seize paperwork from an intern. Then she tore it. Clean. Sharp. Without a moment of hesitation, the pieces fell to the floor. The cabin held its breath. Move to the back. A command. Ava looked at the shredded paper at her feet, but her eyes never changed. Unmoving. Quiet. The kind of quiet that silences boardrooms, that stops executive teams from even breathing wrong. Ava inhaled softly. She felt the heat rising at her cheek, not from humiliation, but from recognition. Melissa had crossed a line Ava never ignored. Doors opened in her mind. Memories of being misjudged. Executive meetings thick with outdated bias. Policies she herself had written against discrimination, now twisted into a bitter irony. She didn't get angry. She didn't lash out. She simply stared at Melissa, gaze flat as steel. A warning, the first sign of an approaching quake. Melissa mistook the silence for surrender. She smirked, turning to the cabin as if proving her power. "Please stand up before I call security." The cabin held its breath. The engines outside droned like a countdown to exposure. Ava rose slowly. Not to leave, not to move to the back, but to face the root of the problem. Her voice was low, steady, each word a nail hammered into fate. "You have no idea what you're doing." Melissa laughed, smug and mocking. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm maintaining order." But Ava didn't break eye contact. "No. You're pushing yourself past the point of no return." The sentence, soft, almost gentle, made Chloe's heart stop. Ethan inhaled sharply. Amber straightened, sensing a bigger explosion. Melissa didn't understand, but the cabin understood. The imaginary camera understood. The audience understood. A quiet power was awakening in silence, a storm gathering behind the still unblinking eyes of Ava Mitchell. And this was only the beginning. Captain Ryan Dalton stepped out of the cockpit, his face tight, his eyes sweeping the cabin, before locking on to the storm's epicenter. Melissa stood tall, brimming with false confidence. Ava stood calm, steady, unshaken. The air was so thick that a single breath felt like it could shatter it. Melissa stepped forward, as if the outcome had already tilted in her favor. "Captain, this passenger is causing a disturbance. I request that she be removed from the aircraft immediately." Ryan did not look at Melissa. He looked at Ava, a long, measured look filled with a rising unease. Ava stood with her back straight, silent, her expression unreadable. But it was that very silence that made a cold sensation climb down Ryan's spine. He inhaled slowly and asked, "Are you Ava Mitchell?" Ava answered with two steady words, "I am." Melissa let out a dismissive laugh. "Captain, she is clearly lying." The owner of this aircraft, Ryan, cut her off his voice, not angry, but sharp enough to slice the room in half. "Melissa, be quiet." The entire cabin froze. Melissa stood stunned, her confidence washing off her face, like makeup dissolving in rain. Amber's mouth dropped open. Ethan exhaled softly, as if he had expected this. Chloe's heartbeat skipped. Ryan swallowed the embarrassment rising in his chest as he continued. "I just received an emergency call from operations. Miss Mitchell is the owner of this aircraft, and she is also the chairwoman of Aerostar Private." Melissa stepped back. "Impossible, no, Captain. There must be a mistake." Ryan turned to her, with the look of a man arriving too late to save a career. "There is no mistake." No one spoke. The cabin fell into a chilling silence, the kind that forms when truth crushes someone who believed they were invincible. Melissa stared at Ava, like she was a storm she had foolishly summoned herself. Ava said nothing. She simply looked at Melissa, a look powerful enough to stop the breath of anyone who had ever abused authority. Melissa grasped for something to cling to. "Captain, I was only following procedure." Ryan's voice hit the floor like metal on steel. "You were not following procedure. You insulted a passenger. You assaulted a passenger. You engaged in clear discrimination." Melissa blinked rapidly, breath breaking apart. "I just thought she didn't fit." Ava took one step toward Melissa. Not fast, not loud. But the weight of it pushed the tension in the cabin even deeper. "You did not think," Ava said, her voice low and solid as stone. "You judged. You imposed. And you believed you had the right to do so." A passenger somewhere in the back let out a sharp breath. Chloe looked away, unable to bear watching Melissa collapse in the very space where she had once stood as if she owned it. Ava continued, her gaze unwavering. "You did not ask. You did not check. You did not verify. You decided my worth based only on my skin and my silence." Melissa trembled violently. "I did not mean to." Ava tilted her head slightly, her eyes cold, offering no room for forgiveness. "You meant it from the first second you saw me." Ethan gripped the side of his seat, feeling as if he were witnessing a witness delivering testimony in a supreme courtroom. Amber placed a hand on her chest, her heart pounding, as if afraid to miss a single second of judgment. Ryan spoke, his voice low but absolute. "Miss Mitchell, how would you like to handle this matter?" Ava did not rush. She looked around the cabin, at the shocked faces, at the few regretful eyes, at the phones recording in secret. Then she looked at Melissa, who was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Ava spoke a single sentence, and the cabin shivered, as if a cold wind had swept through. "This is not the time." A short sentence carrying a promise, a verdict suspended in midair. Chloe stepped back, knowing this was far from over. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, sensing the shift in power vibrating beneath the cabin floor. Ava returned to seat 2A. She sat down back straight calm, as though she were the one commanding the entire space. Melissa stood frozen, as if stripped of every ounce of authority she once believed was hers. And one thing remained like a ticking device in the cabin, the phone call Ava had made earlier, the one no one knew about. The call that would push everything higher, not lower. And everyone could feel it. This was only the first spark of the storm that would sweep away every trace of injustice in this cabin. Captain Ryan Dalton returned to the cockpit, closing the door behind him, like sealing off the last escape route Melissa Carter would ever have. Yet the first-class cabin buzzed like an overloaded circuit. No one spoke. No one even breathed too loudly. Everyone felt it. What Ava had just done was only the beginning. Ava sat upright in seat 2A, carrying the steady composure of someone who had faced far harsher battles than an overreaching flight attendant. But beneath that quiet stillness, a rising wave was forming, not loud, not rushed, but certain. Melissa remained frozen a few steps away, her eyes empty, as if she had just realized she had triggered her own self-destruction mechanism with no way to stop it. The cabin lights reflected off her cheekbones, exposing the truth. Her face had gone pale. Sweat glistened along her temples. Ethan Cole opened his laptop, not to work, but to turn on his webcam. He adjusted the angle and pretended to be busy, while secretly recording every flicker in Melissa's expression. Not for drama, but because he recognized the unmistakable signs of a looming lawsuit. Amber Shaw leaned toward her seatmate, whispering just loud enough for the entire cabin to catch. "If this goes viral, this airline is finished." Melissa heard it. She whipped around. "Shut up!" You do not understand what is happening." Her voice trembled. For the first time since stepping onto the plane, Melissa had truly lost control. Amber let out a laugh. "I understand one thing: you just offended the wrong person." Ava glanced toward Amber with a small appreciative nod, yet her eyes stayed fixed forward, unmoved by the support. Ava did not need allies. She only needed the truth. Chloe Reed stood near the cabin door, clutching her clipboard tightly. She knew things had spun out of Melissa's control long ago, and she knew this as well. When the owner of the aircraft had gone, this quiet, the next storm, would not leave Melissa a single scrap of authority to cling to. Gathering her courage, Chloe stepped closer to Ava. My Ava looked at her, her gaze softening slightly. "I know. You didn't choose the wrong side." The sentence nearly made Chloe burst into tears. For the first time in this chaos, someone actually saw her. Melissa lunged forward and yanked Chloe's arm. "You are not allowed to speak to a disruptive passenger." Ava did not move, but her eyes locked onto Melissa, thickening the air around them. "I am not the one causing a disturbance." The cabin paused as if the world had skipped a beat. Ava took a half step forward. "But I will be the one responsible for what comes next." Melissa stepped back. Then another step. Ethan looked up, eyes sharp, analyzing the shifting atmosphere. "Miss Mitchell," he said quietly. "If you need me to testify," Ava replied. "No need. Everything is about to reveal itself." A soft ding echoed through the cabin, a system alert, a message only the crew could hear. Only Melissa noticed the indicator light flash on the panel. Her eyes widened. "No, that cannot be." Ava sat back down, crossing her legs, setting her phone on the armrest. The screen glowed with a short message. "Operations team en route." Melissa grabbed the radio, speaking rapidly into the mic. "Captain, we do not need." A deep male voice responded. Not angry, not loud, only cold and precise like a perfectly honed blade. "This is no longer your decision, Melissa." Melissa lowered her hand, as if the last string holding her upright had been severed. Ava stayed silent. Her stillness felt like the quiet inside the eye of a hurricane, but everyone knew it was only the preparation before the next turn of the storm. Chloe looked at Ava, swallowing her fear. They are really coming," Ava nodded once. "Yes." Ethan exhaled. A private jet stopping mid-flight, an operations team arriving directly on the runway. "There is only one reason for that." Amber cut in. "She truly owns this aircraft." Melissa spun around. "You do not know anything," Ava interrupted, her voice, low but resonant like a drumbeat inside the silent cabin. "You do not understand your situation, Melissa." Melissa turned back her hands, trembling beyond control. I can explain." Ava looked at her the way someone looks at a door that has been rotten for years, but is only now starting to fall off its hinges. "You had that chance. From the very first second." The plane shuddered slightly. The engines began to shift tone. Anyone experienced with flying recognized this. The jet was preparing for an emergency landing. Amber gasped. "They are actually doing what she said." The cabin fell into absolute silence, like a cathedral awaiting judgment. Ava did not celebrate. She did not smile. She did not need to, because the balance of power had already flipped. When the wheels touched the runway, a collective breath swept through the cabin. Chloe straightened her anxiety, transforming into deep respect. Ethan looked at Ava, as if witnessing a master class in high-level power. A woman who did not need to yell, did not need to threaten, but could make an entire system correct itself simply by existing. Ava closed her eyes for a brief moment, not from fatigue, but to prepare for what came next. Melissa stood trembling her face, pale as ash, and from outside the window came the unmistakable sound of black SUVs stopping beside the aircraft, heavy, authoritative, decisive. Ava's operations team had arrived, and the moment they stepped into the cabin, Melissa's fate would no longer be hers to shape. The room of power had been opened. Ava stepped into it without needing an invitation, and Melissa was about to be pushed out with no path back. The aircraft door opened with the heavy thud of metal. A wave of heat from the runway rolled into the cabin, carrying the scent of jet fuel and mixing with the dense tension hanging in the air. Every gaze shot toward the entrance, where 3 people in black suits stepped in with the precision of a team that had rehearsed this formation hundreds of times, powerful, efficient, no wasted movement. Leading them was Jonas Price, 47 Aerostar's Chief Operating Officer. His expression was cold, the presence of a man accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of employees. Behind him were Marilyn Ortiz, 38 Senior Legal Counsel, and Derek Miles, 41 Head of Aviation Security. The 3 moved straight toward Seat 2, a not looking at anyone, not breaking stride. Melissa saw them. Her legs weakened. She stumbled back instinctively, her spine hitting the seat behind her. No, this is not because of me. This is just a misunderstanding. Jonas did not look at her. He looked at Ava and bowed his head. Miss Mitchell, we have received the report. The entire cabin trembled. An executive of the airline bowing to Ava. Ethan leaned forward thinking, this is no longer a cabin incident. This is an entire system shifting. Ava responded with a small nod, her calm steady like underground water running through steel. Good, because we need to talk. Melissa rushed in, panic cracking her voice. I did not know who she was. I thought Marilyn cut her off, her voice so sharp it chilled the entire cabin. Flight Attendant Carter, you are not permitted to make any further statements until you have legal representation. All of your actions have been recorded by the cabin cameras. Melissa opened her mouth to protest, but Derek stepped between her and Ava, a living wall. For the safety of passengers and crew, Miss Carter, step back. Melissa shook so hard she had to grab the seat to keep from collapsing. Ava stood. No one spoke, but everyone felt the weight of her presence in every step she took. No noise, no threat, just gravity that pulled every stare toward her. Mr. Price, Ava said, I want you to hear this directly from me. Jonas straightened further, ready for each word. I'm here to clarify everything. Ava turned her gaze to Melissa. From the moment I stepped into this cabin, Miss Carter behaved in a way that can be described with one word: discrimination. She judged my worth by my skin, by her assumptions, by the small authority she believed was absolute. Melissa burst into tears. I didn't mean, you meant it, Ava answered. She did not raise her voice, did not show anger, but each word dropped like a hammer. From the very first look, the cabin went still. Ava continued, you refused to serve me. You spilled water on me. You accused me of not having a seat, and worst of all, you slapped me. On an aircraft I own. Jonas turned to Derek. Do we have the cabin logs? Yes. Everything is recorded and synced to the internal system. It cannot be erased. Melissa collapsed into a seat, holding her head. Please, I am sorry I did not know. Ava stepped closer. That is the problem. You did not know. But you thought you knew everything. Amber Shaw covered her mouth in shock. Ethan nodded slowly, witnessing a verdict delivered to the right person at the right time. Ava looked at Jonas. I want this handled exactly by the book, publicly, transparently, and thoroughly. Jonas bowed his head again. Miss Mitchell, I understand your request, and on behalf of Aerostar, I am enforcing immediate action. He turned to Melissa, his tone devoid of emotion. Melissa Carter, you are hereby suspended. Your system access is locked. You will face an internal disciplinary hearing for professional misconduct, discriminatory behavior, and assaulting a passenger. Melissa cried openly now, but the cabin felt no sympathy. The moment Ava reclaimed control of the space, erased any confusion about right and wrong. Ava looked at her one last time. You should know this. Real power does not shout, it does not threaten, and it certainly does not come from the uniform you wear. Her gaze lowered, igniting the final sentence. It comes from how you treat people. And today, you failed. At that moment, footsteps sounded at the aircraft door, heavy, precise, unmistakably authoritative. 2 airport police officers entered the cabin. Derek gestured. They are here at our request. Melissa stared at Ava, her face white as paper. No, please do not. Ava turned away. The rest is their job. The officers approached. The click of metal handcuffs snapped through the cabin, crisp and cold. A small sound, but enough to plunge the room into a silence deeper than fear. Chloe looked away, tears falling not for Melissa, but because she understood justice had finally been restored. Ava was not destroying a person. She was correcting a wrong that had gone unchecked for far too long inside first-class cabins across the world. Melissa was escorted out, the sound of her shoes on the floor, like the countdown to the collapse of blind arrogance. Ava stood still, eyes drifting to the window, where sunlight cut across the wing. Not the light of victory, the light of order restored. Ethan spoke softly, as if honoring a solemn moment. This story is going to change the entire aviation industry. Ava did not answer. She did not need to, because she knew the shift had begun the moment Melissa tore her boarding pass. When Melissa was escorted off the aircraft, the cabin door closed behind her, like a final period at the end of a sentence. But the silence that followed was not the end. It was the stillness before Ava Mitchell's true authority expanded through the cabin, like light sweeping across a space once shadowed by prejudice. Jonas Price straightened his posture, adjusted his tie, then turned toward Ava. Miss Mitchell, we apologize for the entire incident. Would you like to transfer to the backup aircraft immediately? Ava sat back in seat 2A, her hands resting on the armrests, her posture steady and composed, as if she were seated in a high-level boardroom instead of a cabin that had just endured a crisis. No, I want this flight to continue, and I want everyone in this cabin to witness how we correct a system when it fails. Ethan Cole smiled faintly. This woman was not only reclaiming justice for herself, she was giving the aviation industry a moral masterclass. Amber Shaw whispered to the passenger beside her, intentionally loud enough for others to hear. She's not just a CEO, she's a walking revolution. Chloe stood nearby, her eyes still red, but her expression now firm. Ava called her name. Chloe. She startled. Yes, Miss Mitchell. You tried to do the right thing, even when your superior was wrong. Ava looked at her the way someone looks at a door to a future beginning to open. That is not easy, and not many people dare. Chloe tried to steady her voice, but it still trembled. I just thought no one deserves to be treated like that. Ava nodded. Because of people like you, I still believe this industry has hope." Jonas looked from Chloe to Ava, his expression shifting as if something important had just become clear. "Miss Mitchell, I propose a promotion for Miss Reed to the position of first-class lead." Ava tilted her head slightly. "No, I want her promoted to cabin supervisor. She deserves it." Chloe's mouth fell open. Words refused to form. Ethan placed a hand over his chest and let out an impressed "wow." Jonas straightened again, as if receiving a directive from the top of the corporate hierarchy. "I will process the paperwork as soon as we land." A soft murmur spread through the cabin. Not gossip. The sound of people witnessing history written with a single sentence. Ava turned to Chloe. "From now on, you supervise this cabin. I want you to make sure every passenger receives proper service." Chloe inhaled deeply, snapping back into professional focus with impressive speed. "Yes, Miss Mitchell, I will take care of it immediately." She stepped forward with newfound confidence. Power, when given to the right person, always makes them stand taller. Ethan faced Ava. "You just did something I have never seen a CEO do on a flight." Ava looked out the window, sunlight reflecting across her cheek. A title is not meant to hang on an office chair. It is meant to fix what is broken exactly where it breaks. Ethan leaned back, his eyes filled with genuine respect. "I hope this story spreads. It deserves to," Ava replied quietly. "It will spread, but not because I own this aircraft. It will spread because Melissa is not the first. And if we do not fix this, hundreds more will suffer the same." The atmosphere shifted, from tension to introspection, from shock to awareness, as if everyone suddenly saw the hidden structure of a social issue they had only vaguely sensed before. Jonas moved to the cabin door and said to the remaining crew, "Prepare for takeoff. This cabin is under the supervision of Miss Reed." And just when everyone thought the matter was closed, Ava spoke softly. "Wait." The entire cabin turned toward her. Ava did not stand. She did not need to. She simply tilted her head, eyes locking on to Jonas. "There is one more thing." The air tilted like a curtain about to rise for the next act of the story. Jonas tightened his jaw. "I am listening." Ava spoke slowly, clearly each word, like a pin striking the deepest flaws in a system. "I want a full retraining of the entire flight attendant staff, and I want to lead the first session, in person." The cabin fell into complete silence. No one moved. Ethan stared at Ava, as if witnessing a skyscraper rising from the ground. Amber whispered softly, "She is not fixing one person. She is fixing an entire industry." Jonas bowed his head. "We will arrange it." Ava leaned back in her seat. "Now we take off." The aircraft began to taxi toward the runway. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating Ava's face, not with pride, but with the determination of someone who had chosen to fight for more than herself. And everyone in the cabin understood this was no longer a story about a slap. This was a story about awakening. The first-class cabin gradually settled as the aircraft accelerated down the runway, but beneath the surface, there were still currents of tension, subtle yet present, shaped by glances that carried equal parts respect and disbelief toward the woman seated in 2A, as if she were now the axis around which the flight revolved. Ava Mitchell closed her eyes for a moment, not to rest, but to regain internal balance just seconds before the plane left the ground. The seatbelt sign illuminated. A gentle vibration swept through the fuselage. When the wheels lifted off the runway, the cabin drifted into that suspended place between sky and earth, a space where fear and authority reveal themselves more easily than anywhere else. Chloe Reed walked down the aisle with a new demeanor, steady, efficient, confident. Her hand still trembled slightly, but her voice, when speaking to passengers, had changed completely. "Would you like more water? Would you like to change your meal selection?" She worked with the energy of someone determined to prove that Ava had not placed her trust in the wrong person. Ethan Cole watched Chloe, then Ava, then the entire cabin. He saw one thing clearly: how people behave in front of power when power is sitting right in front of them. Many passengers pretended to act normal, but their eyes betrayed something else. They were witnessing Ava as a symbol of a page being turned. Ava opened her eyes as Chloe approached. "Are you all right?" Ava asked gently. Chloe nodded. "I just do not want to make any mistakes." Ava answered, "People make mistakes only when they do not see the problem. You see very clearly. That is already the hardest part." The words gave Chloe a point of balance, making her stand a fraction taller. She walked away, leaving Ava under the quiet observation of at least 3 passengers pretending to read magazines. Ava did not care. She opened her phone, scrolling through emails until she reached a private folder labeled Aerostar Personnel Confidential. More than anyone, Ava knew that to repair a system, she had to understand where it was tangled, where it was decaying, who could be saved, and who needed to be removed. While she read, Amber Shaw approached her voice, gentler than usual. "I just wanted to say I really respect how you handled everything." Ava looked up, her expression neither cold nor soft. Respect should not come after witnessing injustice. It should come before it happens. Amber swallowed. "I understand. I will remember that." Ava nodded and returned to her screen. Amber walked back to her seat, unusually quiet, reflecting for the first time on how she viewed other people. A soft chime sounded from the intercom. Jonas Price stepped out from the forward section and approached Ava with measured caution. "Miss Mitchell, I have some documents for you. We have issues with 2 department heads connected to flight attendant training. They may have allowed gaps that kept someone like Carter in her position for far too long." Ava read quickly, her eyes sharp as a blade moving along each line. "I will deal with them after we land," she said. "But this is not just about me. This must become precedent." Jonas paused for a beat. "I agree," Ava continued. "We need a new code, not just against discrimination, one that redefines human standards for the entire system." Jonas took notes. "Do you have an initial guideline in mind?" Ava spoke slowly, clearly, each word striking with purpose. "First class cannot be a stage where prejudice performs. It must be the place where the standard is set high enough for the entire aircraft to follow." Ethan, seated 2 rows away, heard every word. He murmured to himself, "That is not a company philosophy. That is the philosophy of real leadership." Chloe returned to serve hot tea. As she placed the tray beside Ava, her hand trembled only slightly, the reflex of someone who had survived a storm but remained standing. Ava glanced at her and asked quietly, "How did they treat you when Melissa was still working?" Chloe hesitated, then spoke honestly. "She did not like me. She hated that I would not pick sides. I did not join in when she talked badly about passengers. Because of that, she always treated me like an outsider." Ava looked directly into Chloe's eyes. "You are not an outsider. You are the future of this cabin." A short sentence, but for Chloe, it was the first acknowledgement of her ability in an entire year. As Chloe walked away, Ava continued observing the cabin. Every expression, every gesture. She saw something clearer than ever. First class was not just a luxurious space. It was where human nature revealed itself fastest, because privilege often makes people believe they stand above someone else. Melissa had been a symptom. The system was the disease. Ava set her phone down and looked at the soft golden lights lining the cabin ceiling. How many flights have let incidents like this slip through? She was not speaking to anyone. But Jonas understood the weight of the question. Too many. Ava exhaled, not out of exhaustion, but preparation. Today I am not just fixing a single incident. I am restructuring the entire framework. The plane flew smoothly, but the atmosphere had changed. The woman in seat 2A was no longer just a passenger. She was someone who had held up a mirror for an entire industry to confront itself. And every passenger felt it in their own way. Ethan typed notes into his laptop ideas, forming for an article about power and ethics. Amber sat silently, her usual chatter replaced by thoughts about how often she had judged others at a glance. Chloe worked with a confidence she had never shown before, not because she had been rewarded, but because she had finally been seen. And Ava, she was preparing for the next step, a larger step, one that would not end with a single flight. The battle was not finished. It had simply changed altitude. The first-class cabin stabilized as the aircraft settled into its flight path, yet no one felt relaxed. Something in the air had changed tone. Not tension, but a shift in power, a quiet kind of authority that did not need to be displayed, yet strong enough to keep every passenger silent, as Ava Mitchell placed her laptop on the tray table and began typing. It was not an email, it was not a report, it was the outline for the transformation of an entire system. Ava opened a blank file and typed the title, Standards of Dignity Internal Directive Draft. Chloe walked past and could not help glancing at the screen, not out of curiosity, but admiration. She saw clearly in each line, Ava wrote that this was not a reaction. It was a vision. Chloe whispered, as she set a drink tray down, "People are talking about you. But differently now. They see you as someone to listen to, not someone to fear." Ava paused her typing and looked up. "Do you truly see that?" "Yes. When you stood up earlier, maybe they were afraid. Now they are learning." Ava glanced around the cabin. Ethan pretended to read, but kept watching her from the corner of his eye. Amber sat straighter than usual, no longer wearing the expression of someone hunting for gossip. Even the Hayes couple looked over at Ava from time to time with a quiet respect. A cabin that had once been on fire from injustice was now reshaping itself around the presence of a woman who fought not with anger, but with intellect and principle. Ava gave Chloe a faint smile and returned to her screen. Good, because everything is about to change faster than they expect. The cabin door slid open again. Jonas Price entered, holding a tablet full of internal reports, his expression serious. Miss Mitchell, the legal department, just sent an updated report. There is evidence that Melissa kept her position for the past 3 years because a department head protected her. Ava stopped typing. "Let me see." Jonas handed her the tablet. Ava read quickly, absorbing every flaw, every piece of evidence, every gap in accountability. "This is what happens when the wrong people sit in the right chairs," Ava said, her voice calm but sharp as a surgical blade. Jonas nodded. "Would you like me to address this when we land?" No, Ava replied without looking away from the tablet. "I want you to address it now." Jonas inhaled deeply. He did not question her. He knew Ava never made a request she had not thought through. He turned to leave, but Ava called his name. "Jonas." He stopped, Miss Mitchell-Ava looked at him, her expression composed, yet commanding enough to make him stand straighter. This is not about personal emotion. This is about placing the right people in the right roles. An airline cannot have a head of personnel who does not understand that respect is the minimum standard. Jonas bowed his head. Understood. He left the cabin, and the door closed behind him, leaving the space filled with the steady rhythm of the aircraft. Ethan lowered his laptop and leaned slightly toward Ava. I have worked with many high-ranking leaders, but I have rarely seen anyone handle a crisis with the near icy calm that you do. Ava looked out the window at the endless blue sky. Calm is not a personality trait. It is a choice. If I lose control, the entire system will use it as justification for their wrongdoing. Ethan nodded, respect deepening in his eyes. You are not just doing the right thing. You are doing it in a way no one can argue with. Ava allowed a small smile. If you want to change an industry, the first step is removing the excuses of those who run it. A soft chime echoed. Chloe returned with drinks, but paused when she saw Ava typing again. On Ava's screen, new lines appeared. All flight attendants must be evaluated, not only on skill, but on moral integrity. Each cabin must have a designated person responsible for fairness and human dignity. No one may define a suitable passenger based on race demeanor or silence. Chloe looked at the words like someone seeing a truth they had waited a lifetime to hear. Miss Mitchell-Chloe whispered, almost trembling, "You could save a lot of people." Ava looked up. "No, they have always been worth saving. I am simply restoring justice to its rightful place." The aircraft entered a layer of soft white clouds. The light dimmed, turning the cabin into something like a high-level boardroom awaiting a decisive moment. Ava closed her laptop. "It is time." Ethan turned. "Time for what?" Ava answered, her voice low and resonant like a drum, to send the message. Ava opened her phone and typed an internal instruction. A single announcement, clear, firm, impossible to misinterpret. Begin full system reform immediately upon landing. The message was sent. No signature, no confirmation needed. The entire organization would adjust to her direction. In that moment, Ava Mitchell was no longer the passenger in seat 2A. She was the epicenter of a reform that would spread from this cabin to the entire aviation industry. The aircraft pierced through a dense layer of clouds, the flickering light in the cabin shifting like the pulse of a transformer preparing to change state. No one realized how important that moment was, but Ava Mitchell did. Light always signaled the moment power began to move. Ava opened her eyes and looked straight ahead, as if she had already seen what was coming. Her finger brushed the screen. An email had been sent. A directive had been issued. A system had just been shifted off its old axis. The first-class cabin was so quiet that Chloe's pen could be heard trembling slightly as she took notes, not from fear, but from knowing she was standing in a moment that would redefine her entire career. Jonas Price returned to the cabin faster than before. He stood beside Ava, lifting the tablet like someone presenting newly decrypted evidence. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice dropping half a tone. "I just received a response from the Executive Council. They approved all of your directives, and they want you to personally lead the first reform meeting." Ava leaned back, her eyes narrowing, as if weighing every implication of that message. "Good. But I do not want the meeting to be a temporary fix. I want it to work like surgery cutting straight into the diseased tissue." Jonas nodded, his expression tightening like someone approaching an emergency shareholder session. They also requested a full report of everything that happened on this flight as a model case. It will become mandatory training material. Ava met his eyes. Do it. The air seemed to compress with the weight of her words. Ethan Cole closed his laptop and folded his arms. I may not work in aviation, he said, but I know when an entire industry is about to undergo a generational shift. And it starts with you. Ava did not turn toward him, but her eyes narrowed slightly. This industry needs a new generation, one that understands human beings are not an accessory to procedure. Ethan breathed out, full of respect. You are redefining the standard, Ava replied. I am simply pulling the standard back to where it should have been. From the rear of the cabin, the Hayes couple approached. Mr. Hayes, usually slow and deliberate in his movements, walked faster than usual today. Miss Mitchell, he said, his voice low but steady. My wife and I want to apologize for not speaking up earlier. We saw what happened, but we stayed silent. Ava looked at him without blame. Not everyone is taught to stand up. What matters is that you understand now. Mrs. Hayes clutched her handbag, her eyes wet. No one deserves what you experienced today. Ava answered simply, Thank you. No judgment, no reproach. But her calm silence taught them more than any lecture could. As they returned to their seats, Amber Shaw took a deep breath, then stood and approached Ava with a new resolve. I've said a lot of foolish things in my life, Amber admitted, her eyes sincere in a way they rarely were. But what happened today, I am going to tell it exactly as it was. No embellishing, no dramatizing, just the truth. Ava looked at her. The truth is powerful enough on its own. Amber nodded. Yes. But sometimes it takes someone like you to make us see it. Chloe returned this time, not with a tray for passengers, but with a glass of water she placed in front of Ava with both hands steady. Miss Mitchell, thank you for protecting me. Ava looked up, honest and direct. You do not need protection. You only needed the chance to be right. Chloe smiled, small but burning. I will not let you down. Ava nodded. The aircraft eased into a smoother flight path. The cabin light softened, but the energy didn't fade. It changed form from tension into determination, from anger into awareness. Ava opened her laptop again. She was not writing. She was drawing. A diagram, a blueprint for reform. 3 overlapping circles, system, people, culture. A single arrow pointing to the center, dignity first. Ethan saw the diagram and exhaled, as if witnessing a strategy every corporation wished they had. That is not reform, he said. That is reconstruction. Ava answered, exactly. Reform patches. Mistakes. Reconstruction removes them. As the cabin settled again, Jonas returned with another update. Miss Mitchell, the communications team is requesting guidance. The cabin videos are circulating internally. This could escalate into a public relations crisis. Ava closed her laptop. The only crisis is when we hide the truth. Jonas hesitated. You want to make it public? Ava responded without delay. Make everything public. No sugarcoating. No edits. No scripted statements. Only the correct message. Jonas swallowed hard. He understood that this decision would shake all of Aerostar. Ava spoke with a calm so controlled, it made Jonas straighten unconsciously. Tell them this: we do not avoid our mistakes. We confront them. And we fix them. In that moment, the first-class cabin stopped being a cabin. It became a strategy room, a courtroom of ethics, the launch point of a revolution. And Ava Mitchell sat at its center, never raising her voice, yet making everyone understand a single truth: an industry was turning. A system was being rebuilt, and a new standard was being written right there in seat 2A. The aircraft tilted gently to the left as it turned into the designated air corridor. Sunset poured through the cabin windows, coating every face in a warm orange glow, a stark contrast to the cold undercurrent running beneath the surface. The passengers remained silent, not because they were tired, but because they sensed they were witnessing a moment they would one day recount as something they had seen with their own eyes. Ava Mitchell rested her hand on the wooden tray, not typing, not writing, simply staring ahead at the distant horizon. She was not relaxing. She was assessing, analyzing, calculating the scale of the damage a system suffers when it is exposed without its disguise. Chloe appeared beside her, speaking in a low voice. Miss Mitchell Operations just sent an update. The cabin video of Carter, it has reached senior management. Ava showed no surprise. I assume they are panicking. They are, Chloe said. But I think they are more afraid of you. Ava tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharp enough to make Chloe straighten instinctively. They are not afraid of me, Ava said. They are afraid of the truth. Ethan Cole removed his glasses and studied Ava for a few seconds, as if confirming she understood the magnitude of her own influence. When a CEO steps into a crisis in person, every link in the power chain is forced to look at itself. Ava replied softly. When power sits where it belongs, everything falls into place. Ethan let out a small breath. I have met many people in high positions, but I have never seen anyone use power with the kind of precision you do. Ava looked out the window. Power is not meant to impose. It is meant to correct the boundaries that injustice has carved too deeply. Jonas Price returned his expression, more severe than before. Miss Mitchell HR is requesting emergency direction. They say the head of internal training is in complete panic. He is deleting email logs, deleting records, deleting performance reviews. Ava responded instantly, lock down all of his access. Jonas nodded sharply and began to turn away, but Ava added one more line that made him freeze mid-step. And make sure everything is backed up. Do not let any file disappear. People only delete what they are terrified others will see. Jonas tightened his grip on the tablet. Understood. He walked away with the demeanor of someone carrying out orders from a National Security Council, not from a CEO seated calmly in an aircraft. The cabin brightened with the deepened orange of sunset, the kind of light that felt like a prelude to a grand hearing. Amber Shaw stood and approached Ava, not to seek attention, but because she needed to say something to the only person who made her feel she had to be honest. Miss Mitchell, earlier when I was sitting there, I thought, if no one stands up, things like this will keep happening forever. Ava looked at her with eyes that made it impossible for anyone to speak anything but the truth. And now you are standing up. Amber swallowed. I am standing up because you made me ashamed of myself. Ava placed her hand lightly on the tray. Shame is the beginning. Responsibility is the next step. Amber nodded for the first time, without her usual exaggerated energy. I will do my part. A small alert chimed on Ava's phone. She opened it. A single message from the chairman of the Aerostar board. We will be waiting for you in the executive operations room the moment the aircraft lands. Ethan caught sight of the sender's name and inhaled sharply. You pulled the entire upper board into the room. Ava tilted her head slightly. They pulled up their chairs. I only turned on the light. Chloe returned, both hands gripping her clipboard to keep from trembling. Miss Mitchell, I overheard cabin crew talking. They think you might change the entire organizational hierarchy of the airline. Ava looked at her, her voice calm, yet powerful enough to slow the moment itself. It is not that I might. I must. Chloe drew a breath as if hearing a declaration. So everyone will have to change, with you. Ava answered with a sentence that made every eavesdropper and accidental listener in the cabin feel a chill along their spine. Not with me. With the correct standard. I am simply reminding them of it. The orange glow shifted into a soft violet as the aircraft moved into late sunset. The cabin dimmed into a quiet shade that felt like a courtroom preparing for its final verdict. Jonas returned this time, visibly unsettled. Miss Mitchell, something big has happened. Ava looked up. Jonas turned the screen toward her. A video recorded by a passenger in the back cabin is spreading uncontrollably. It has escaped internal channels. It is flooding social media. And it is going viral. Ethan shot to his feet. Amber covered her mouth. Chloe felt her heartbeat thud so hard it might burst. Ava watched the 3-second clip of Melissa slapping her, as if she had already known it would surface. No panic, no anger, not even a flicker of fear. She simply said one sentence, a sentence that made everyone in the cabin understand that what came next would no longer be about her but about an entire industry. Good. Let the world see what it needs to see. The first-class cabin settled into a dense silence, the kind that appears only when events have grown larger than any one person and have begun to take on the scale of a movement. The video spreading outside was like a spark finding the perfect fuel tank, but Ava Mitchell did not panic. She watched it, the way someone observes a natural process, knowing that when truth appears, darkness has no choice but to recoil. The aircraft began its descent. The cabin vibrated lightly, the tremble of a flight preparing to land, but also the tremble of an industry about to be shaken to its foundation. Ava closed her laptop. Jonas. Prepare the meeting for the moment we reach the ground. Her voice was low, firm, without a single beat of hesitation. Jonas nodded. The operations room is ready. The entire leadership board is there. He paused, then added, and all of them want to hear you speak. Ava looked out the window. The city below grew smaller, its lights beginning to glow like golden veins beneath the darkening sky. Good. This will be their first test. In the row behind, Amber Shaw held her phone, reading the comments flooding under the viral clip. They are supporting you, she said, her eyes wide like a child seeing magic. They are saying this kind of thing happens more often than people realize. There are thousands of comments in minutes. Ava did not even open her phone. Of course they say that, because this is not rare. It is only rare that someone stands up. Ethan Cole sat across from her arms, folded his gaze sharp like he had just solved a perfect power equation. You knew it would go viral from the beginning. Ava did not deny it. I knew no one can bury something that dozens of people witnessed with their own eyes. And no one can silence an entire cabin. Ethan murmured, that is how someone who understands the strength of truth operates. Chloe Reed stood near the cabin door, clutching her clipboard, but no longer shrinking back. She stood like someone who had finally found her place, though her eyes still carried genuine worry as she looked at Ava. Miss Mitchell, now that the video has spread everywhere, do you think some people will try to push back against you? Ava looked at her gentle, but never soft. Yes. And I am prepared. But you must understand something, Chloe. When a broken system is uncovered, there will always be those who try to keep it broken because it protects them. Chloe swallowed her fear. But you are still doing it, Ava answered. I am. Because I am not someone who sits still when truth is being twisted. Ava's gaze drifted across the cabin, pausing briefly on every face. Not to seek approval, but to ensure they understood the role each of them now played in a story far bigger than themselves. The landing gear deployed beneath the plane with a mechanical thud. The cabin shook a little harder. The lights switched to landing mode. The atmosphere carried the weight and gravity of a high-stakes hearing about to begin. Jonas returned. They are waiting for you below. Ava rose, straightened her blazer. She did not walk like someone heading into a meeting. She walked like someone about to step onto a stage to redefine the standards of an entire industry. Chloe watched her with a tight voice, filled with emotion she could not name. Miss Mitchell, thank you for not staying silent. Ava turned. Silence has never saved anyone from injustice. The right voice does. The aircraft touched down with a smoothness that felt engineered by the most precise technicians in the industry. The cabin trembled softly. Everyone held their breath for half a moment. Ava stood ready at the exit, composed, unhurried. She looked like someone moving toward the next chapter of a mission. Jonas Derek Miles and Marilyn Ortiz stood near the door, forming a quiet, protective formation around her, without needing to show it. When the aircraft door opened, the golden runway lights poured into the cabin, illuminating Ava's face, the face of someone who had just endured one battle and was already preparing for a larger one. At the foot of the stairs, a line of black vehicles waited. Security teams, senior personnel, and executives stood assembled. Not to display power, but to receive direction from someone who had shown she understood its meaning better than anyone. Ava descended each step, steady, unhurried. Jonas walked beside her and said quietly, "They are not just waiting for you to meet. They are waiting for you to lead." Ava looked toward the operations building, its glass doors already open to welcome her. "Then let us begin." The moment her foot touched the ground, everyone waiting stood rigid. No one spoke. No one extended a hand. No one even dared breathe too loudly. Ava Mitchell walked forward, and the line of people followed behind her in a straight, unwavering formation. Not because she owned the aircraft, not because she was the CEO, but because she had just done something very few people in any industry ever have the courage to do. She redefined respect. And when the doors of the operations center closed behind her, everyone on the runway understood a new chapter was beginning. Not for the airline, not for the flight, but for the way people treat one another in the sky. In the end, this story reminds us that true power does not come from titles or fear, but from the ability to stand firm in the face of injustice and force an entire system to correct itself according to the right standard. Ava Mitchell did more than defend herself. She opened a door for an entire industry to reconsider the essence of respect. Something seemingly small, yet capable of transforming the entire human experience in the sky. If you believe that respect should be a standard, not a privilege, then like and subscribe to follow more stories that cut to the very roots of our society. And before you leave this video, leave one simple but powerful comment. Respect first.